Hey everyone, it's Amy. It's time to respond to some more video comments. I know that there had been a lot of unanswered comments built up over the last couple of weeks, and I'm still trying to get through them. Sorry if I missed your comments, but please continue to send them my way and I will respond to what I can. Now, let's get into it. How did they keep these methods of announcing the time accurate? How did the night watchman know the interval between beats, pacing, or counting to himself? Other than the time dial, what else did they use to differentiate the time? Was their timekeeping relative to the seasonal changes? How was it regulated across the country? Did they have the concept of time zones? So the night watchmen announced the time, but they didn't keep time themselves. They relied on official timekeeping centers like watchtowers or bell towers. So how did these timekeeping centers tell time? Well, generally they used a water clock. A water clock measures time by the steady dripping or flow of water, and the flow rate is controlled so that the amount of water that drips over time corresponds to the measured units of time. It is usually made of multiple tiers of large containers filled with water, and then the water would drip through a small tube into a lower container. And then the lowest container would have a floating device similar to a buoy, and that was attached to a marked rod or a scale. As water filled the container, officials would read where the water level is against the marked rod or scale to tell the current time. In the drama The Longest Day in Chang'an, the timekeeping official would have to announce the time every time someone asked for it. And all he does is staring at the water clock for his entire shift. And then at fixed intervals, these officials would strike a drum, bell, or wooden board to announce the time to the public, and also to the night watchman. And what's even more interesting is that ancient Chinese timekeeping used an unequal hours system for much of its history. And this means that the length of a daytime hour and the length of nighttime hour changed with the season. So daytime was from sunrise to sunset and was divided into a set number of units. And then nighttime was from sunset to sunrise and was also divided into its own set of number of units. So as days grew longer in summer and daytime units would stretch. And then as nights grew longer in the winter, the nighttime units would stretch. So the water clocks had to be recalibrated accordingly. To regulate the time, the Song Dynasty government had an imperial astronomical bureau, 司天监, which standardized time across the empire using astronomy and water clocks. No concept of modern time zones existed though, and the entire empire followed a single time, the time at the capital. So since transportation and communications were slower, small discrepancies between cities were not a big deal. Okay, next question. What are your favorite dramas at the moment? I'm really enjoying Legend of the Female General, and I loved Legend of Shanghai. Okay, this one is frequently asked. Many of you already know the classic palace drama shows like Rui's Royal Love in the Palace and Story of Yanxi Palace, as well as Empresses in the Palace or Legend of Zheng Huan. So I won't focus on those, but instead I'll mention some of the dramas that I watched recently. First of all, full confession, I have not watched Female General yet. I heard that there is a lot of hype about it though, so I'll have to find time to get to it. However, I did finish Legend of Shanghai and I loved it, especially their portrayal and reference to Qingtianjian, the Directory of Imperial Astronomy. It is one of my favorite imperial government offices because it governed both science and superstition, which is Chinese geomancy, feng shui. It is such an interesting topic, and I hope one day we can do a deep dive video about it. The plot and pacing of this drama are very tight. If you love mystery and court intrigue, this one is for you. And then on top of my must-watch list right now would be Joy of Life. The second season just came out last year, and this one is a fictional dynasty drama, which means that the timeline did not exist in real history, but it may borrow heavily on historical references, for instance, their costumes or court etiquettes and etc. It is a mystery court intrigue drama, and we follow the main character's journey in discovering the past of his mother and how he climbed the corporate ladder in the imperial court through his wit and courage. I think what's interesting about this drama is the way they portray the intricate relationships between the emperor and his sons, and then the power balance between the princesses themselves. I think it's a very unique dynamic, and this drama did an excellent job on showing you the complexity of it. And then recently I just finished watching The Immortal Ascension. This is a xianxia drama, which means it is completely fictional with no dynasty background, no core intrigues, just people flying around and casting spells at each other. But if you're into cool Asian martial arts fight scenes with a sci-fi spin like me, I think you'll really enjoy this one. The plot was a little hard to follow for me though. My husband had to explain some of it to me because he read the original novel that it was based on. Okay, the last one. I actually was not expecting much before I started watching it, but it really surprised me. It's called Riverside Code of the Qingming Festival. The story is set in the Song Dynasty, and it is a mystery-solving type of drama. The drama is very fast-paced and gets to the point immediately with a murder mystery in episode 1, which instantly caught my attention. And then personally, I think the coolest part is how they tie into Zhang Zeduan's famous painting along the river at the Qingming Festival. For those of you who watched my previous video, Spend a Day with Me in the Song Dynasty, that video was inspired by this drama. And it captured the daily lives of commoners so perfectly. I know a lot of you are curious about the commoner lives in ancient China. I think this drama portrays it really, really well. It talks about their struggles, their helplessness that they feel when things are unjust, and the simple joy that they find in daily life. And one thing I found very interesting and extremely relevant to our modern world is that the main character's family was struggling to buy a house in the capital of Bianjing throughout the whole show. And there was a lot of interesting hidden messages there. One thing to watch out for though is that this drama can feel very heavy sometimes. It does have comedic moments, but the overall vibe is very heavy, mainly because the cases that they're solving were very serious crimes, and the writers did a very good job at making you feel the weight of it. My husband said that it reminded him of Criminal Minds a little bit. I remember when you said that sons could marry into his wife's household if his wife's family did not have a son, and made me wonder, did poor families actually adopt children, and what was the actual limit? Also, how did monks and their apprentices actually live? What was their daily routine? So yes, poor families did also practice adoption, but their motivation were usually quite different from those of the wealthy families. Poor families generally would adopt for two reasons: adoption for heirship and adoption for daughter-in-law. Some poor families owned land or a small business, and if they wanted to pass it down within the family line but had no children of their own, they would need to adopt. However, another common reason that a poor family would adopt a child was to secure a future wife for their son. And this practice was known as 童养媳. If a poor family had a son, they faced the challenge of having to pay for expensive betrothal gifts for their son's wife's family. I explained more about these betrothal gifts in my video about the wedding in the Song Dynasty. So when a poor family didn't think that they would be able to pay for the betrothal gifts, they may adopt a young girl instead. And this young girl would be adopted from another poor family, one that probably couldn't afford to feed her anymore. And this young girl would be raised as a daughter-in-law in training. Then when they reached the marriageable age, they would become officially married, bypassing the need for betrothal gifts. And as for the question about the monks, their world was a bit different. Let's look at the monks of the Song Dynasty. The daily life of a monk would vary greatly depending on what kind of monk he was. First, there was the ideal ordained monk, who lived in a temple or in temple communities, and his life was mostly disciplined and filled with meditation and study. And the full lives and schedule of these monks is a bit more complicated and may need its own video. And then there were what we will call farmer monks. In some rural regions, peasant families would have one of their sons ordained as a monk in order to reduce their taxes. So monks were generally exempt from personal taxes and did not have a state-mandated labor. And these monks were basically farmers who held a monk status. They would fulfill their religious duties part-time while still being farmers and providing a tax benefit to their family. And lastly, there are what we will call certificate monks. So the Song Dynasty government sold official monk certificates, 度牒, as a source of extra funds. And these certificates legally register someone as a monk, and that will grant them an exemption from taxes and labor. This meant that many wealthy individuals bought these certificates purely as a tax dodge, with no intention of ever living a religious life. Since the emperor was known as the son of heaven, why wasn't the empress called daughter of heaven? Was there a particular reason, or was it just decided that she should be known as Mother of the Nation? So this one actually had some really good answers in the comments already, but I wanted to answer it here again since it's a really interesting question. The emperor was called the Son of Heaven or Tianzi because he was believed to rule on behalf of the heaven itself. So heaven wasn't seen as a personal god, but as a cosmic force that maintained balance and moral order. This means the emperor wasn't personally divine. He was heaven's representative on earth, chosen by the heaven to maintain harmony among the people. And then here's something really interesting. This belief actually encouraged emperors to rule with benevolence. So in ancient China, natural disasters like floods, droughts, and earthquakes were seen as a sign of heaven's displeasure. So to prove his rule was righteous, an emperor had to minimize suffering, respond to disasters, and keep his people content. So why wasn't the empress called the daughter of heaven? Because her legitimacy didn't come directly from heaven, it came from the emperor, and she was his partner in maintaining order within the inner realm, which was the imperial harem, and the emperor's household, while the emperor maintained order in the outer realm, the empire itself. And that's why the empress was honored as the mother of the nation, or Zhonggong, which meant the central palace. So these titles symbolized her nurturing, stabilizing role, the yin to the emperor's yang. What is your favorite idiom that is said in Mandarin? I looked some up really quick, and one that I liked most was the water level dropped, revealing the rocks, in Chinese, 水落石出. I lived in the southern US, and the one idiom that I really like is home training. That person has no home training basically means that the person is ill-mannered because the parents never taught manners at home. I love this question. Idioms are such a fun window into culture. So as for my personal favorite, of course I have many, but one of them is 画蛇添足, to draw a snake and then to add legs to it. The story comes from the Warring States period. A group of men were competing to draw a snake the fastest, and one of them finished first. But instead of stopping, he thought, I'll add some legs to make it better. So of course, a snake with legs isn't a snake anymore, so he lost. So today we use it to describe someone who ruins something by overdoing it. It's the ancient version of if an ink broke, don't fix it. And interestingly, a lot of the most powerful idioms in Chinese have to do with water. Another favorite is 滴水穿石. Dripping water can go through stone. It means that with patience and persistence, even the hardest obstacle can be overcome. This imagery is very simple, but it captures the Chinese philosophy of steady effort leading to lasting results. I'm curious, how were toilets in ancient China? A Chinese translator actually did a long-form video on toilets in the Forbidden City, and I thought it was pretty interesting too, if you want to check it out. And some of the earliest toilets in China that we know of dates back over 2,000 years to the Han Dynasty. Archaeologists have actually found restrooms with stone seats and even flushing systems, basically a pit connected to a water channel that could carry waste away. In rural areas, the restrooms is sometimes close to the farmland, so the waste would be easily distributed as fertilizer. Public toilets were widespread in the Song Dynasty cities like Kaifeng and Hangzhou. The Song Dynasty has some of the largest, most densely populated cities in the world at the time, so sanitation was a real concern. Historical texts like Meng Lianglu and Dreams of Splendor of the Eastern Capital mentions communal restrooms that ordinary citizens could use. Some were even maintained by the government. Others were privately owned and operated as businesses where the waste was collected and sold to farmers as fertilizer. And unsurprisingly, they weren't pleasant. Accounts described them as smelly and crowded, especially in the summer. These weren't private stalls like today. They were long pits, often with wooden planks or stone slabs across the top for seating, kind of like the ancient Roman ones. Some were divided for men and women, but many were shared. Water channels or buckets were used to rinse waste away when available. Fast forward to the Ming and Qing dynasties. An interesting fact is that the Forbidden City, with almost 9,000 rooms, did not have permanent restrooms. Instead, chamber pots were used in every hall and residence. So palace maids and eunuchs were responsible for emptying them discreetly. For the emperor, chamber pots could be made of fine porcelain or even silver. And in winter, these were kept in heated cabinets so they wouldn't be icy cold. Eunuchs had the very unlucky job of cleaning and carrying them, sometimes immediately after use. It was a gross but very important duty in the palace. This detail actually shows up in the story of Yanxi Palace. When the emperor was food poisoned, he ends up summoning his toilet multiple times. Historically, that is accurate. If the emperor had food poisoning or stomach trouble, eunuchs would have to rush chamber pots in and out all night long. So yes, no restrooms in the Forbidden City, but lots of chamber pots, carefully hidden, but always nearby. I've always wondered if the physicians in the Forbidden City go home at night, or are there eunuchs guarding them while they're on call? I've seen 2 different C-dramas that make it seem like they couldn't have children. I think the easiest way to think of physicians in the Forbidden City is as government officials. In the Qing dynasty, they were a part of a department known as the Imperial Medical Academy, 太医院. They were scholars who studied medicine and had to pass imperial examinations in order to become recognized as physicians. As with other government officials, they were people that had their own families and lived outside of the imperial palace. However, there were generally a rotation system where a few physicians had to stay on call within the palace. And while on duty, physicians had to stay in designated areas, and they were in fact heavily supervised by eunuchs. They were never allowed to be alone with an imperial consort, and if they treated a concubine or the empress, eunuchs or palace maids were always present. This protected both the woman's reputation and the physician from suspicion. And they usually avoid direct skin contact, which is why you see them often covering the consort's wrist with a piece of silk or cloth. Medical cases were carefully recorded in palace archives. If a treatment went wrong, a physician could face demotion or punishment. But in contrast, if they saved the emperor's life, they could be richly rewarded. That's it for this time. Hope I got to answer some of your questions. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.